Welcome to the Empowered to Connect podcast, where we come together to discuss a healing-centered approach to engagement and well-being for ourselves, our families, and our communities. I'm JD Wilson, and I am your host. And today on the show, we talk about sibling conflicts, sibling rivalry, kids not getting along together in your family, whatever you want to call it. That is our topic of conversation today. And we brought two brilliant therapists, Dr. Matt Smith, who we just talked to about ADHD a few weeks ago, and Lauren Wantz, who came on to talk with us about how do we support our kids as they are constantly fighting, arguing, engaging in conflict, again, whatever term you want to use, together. We wanted to talk about this particularly because we've heard several requests for this particular topic, but also feels like, when you get into those winter doldrums of there's just school and school and school and school and the monotony of the routine and the schedule, it can be tough for kids to grapple with that. So that said, we wanted to talk with Dr. Matt Smith and Lauren Wantz about that, and we did. It was incredible and helpful and great. And so you'll hear that interview here in just a second. Two things I want to remind you of before we get there. Number one, our online Cultivate Connection course registration is open. So for the first time ever, we are teaching our Cultivate Connection curriculum live online. For 1,000 reasons, we haven't done that before, and it will not be a regular offering going forward. We may do it again, but there is nothing set in stone to have a regular scheduled Cultivate Connection course online being offered all the time. We still do believe, as we always have, that this class is best served up live in person with facilitators who are in your community, who can be active in helping you set up supports for your family and helping you set up supports for other families as well. Obviously, the best case scenario for parents is that we are getting to do this thing in real, authentic community. And this is one of, we think, the best ways to facilitate that is through the Cultivate Connection course being taught live online. For some of you, you don't have a facilitator in your area, or the time constraints are such that with your family dynamic, you're not able to make it happen. And we get that, so we are offering it online. You can find the online signups at empoweredtoconnect.org, or you can go to the link in our bio on Instagram. You can check out the show notes below. Basically, if you follow ETC in any way, form, or fashion, you can find the link for this. Also live right now, speaking of those classes being taught live in person, are our facilitator registrations. So one of the things I wanted to remind all of you of, if you are already beginning to play that role of supporting families in your community and helping them through that process of becoming trauma-informed parents, becoming connection-aware parents, this is for you. We are looking for folks who are ready and willing to take that dive into becoming a Cultivate Connection facilitator and teach the courses live in your community. And that is something that we are almost done with registrations for. So we still have a few spots open. You can find the registration form on empoweredtoconnect.org in the show notes, in the bio, of course, just like the registrations for the online course. So those are two things I wanted to remind you of. Our last thing is we are really, really thankful to all of you who follow us on YouTube, who are subscribed to our channel on YouTube. We just hit a huge milestone. Recently, we crossed over 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, and we are really grateful for all of that. But wanted, for those of you who don't know, we have a YouTube channel to introduce you to it. So our YouTube channel can be found by going to YouTube and searching for Empowered to Connect, or you can simply type Empowered to Connect after youtube.com on your web browser. You can find us there. There are hours upon hours upon hours of video resources, from all of our podcast episodes to videos from Dr. Karen Purvis and Michael and Amy Monroe. Some of our therapists are on there as well. We have Jesse Ferris, one of our ATC trainers, teaching play personalities, on and on and on and on. You can also catch all of our animations and shorts there as well. So we've got lots of stuff there for you. Just wanted to direct you to that. If you are not one of those 10,000 subscribers, we would love for you to be, so you can see all of the most up-to-date video resources that are coming your way through Empowered to Connect. And lastly, I said that was last. That wasn't last. This is last. Lastly, if you've not left us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, please do so. It does help us to get everyone who might be searching for content like this into our kind of algorithm and get our show placed in front of new audiences that might not have seen it before. And so a rating and a review takes about 5 minutes or less to do, and it is immensely helpful for us in making sure that anyone who is looking for content like this is able to easily find it. So that is all for now. Thank you so much for listening. Now, without any further ado, here are Lauren Wantz, Dr. Matt Smith, and I talking about sibling conflict. All right. Well, as we said in the opening, we've got Tana Ottinger with us. And we've also got Dr. Matt Smith back again after talking about ADHD a few episodes ago. And today, Lauren Wantz. And so we wanted to introduce you guys to Lauren. She's not been on the podcast yet, but she is a therapist with us in the Memphis Family Connection Center. And so I would say, Lauren, before we jump into the whole topic, if you just want to introduce yourself to those who are listening, and though you have a giant following, some people might not have heard of you yet, from from this. So would you just kind of share who you are and what your work looks like here?
Yeah, absolutely. As JD said, my name is Lauren Wantz. I am a mother to two. I have a teenager and a preschooler. Can't really call him a toddler anymore. And so let's keep that in mind as I'm talking about sibling challenges today in this podcast, that I've got this huge age gap that we're navigating. But I'm a therapist here on staff at MFCC. I see kids, I see families, I see adults. I'm a Memphian, born and raised here.
Awesome.
Love serving this population in our community.
Sweet. So we wanted to talk today about something that I think as we talked, all of us hear about this, and obviously I would say in my situation, not in a therapeutic context, but just friends talking around dinner tables or at whatever, basketball practices or whatever, about sibling conflict or I don't think we want to go so specific as sibling rivalry necessarily, but that term gets thrown out all the time. And so we wanted to, much like how we've talked about both anxiety and sleep issues, not come on here and say, here's the 3 steps to eliminating sibling conflict, because those 3 steps do not exist universally. But we want to give some frameworks for how do we do this in a connected way. Matt, before we started recording, you said it used to be easy. You just separate them. You go to your room. You go to your room. That's it. Problem solved. Come back when you're ready to solve this problem. And yet that does pose a problem. And so why don't we even start there in the and if that sounds like I am making fun of that way of parenting, I am not. That was where I resided for the first several years of parenting. That's how, the home I grew up in was that way. Right. And it was not out of some mean intent. It was simply best available, practices in the moment. And so I think why would we, Matt, now probably advise against that way of thinking when it starts coming to sibling conflict?
Well, yeah. So we're all about relationships and connection around here, aren't we? Yeah. So we want what's best for our kids. We want what's best for us. We want to be connected as adults. We want to model that for our kids. We want to teach them how to resolve conflict in a connected manner, or at least where connection is there on the backside, right? So, but I will say, even as we were talking just before we started here, there are times where just logistically, functionally, at least at the beginning, you might have to have a bit of separation, right? You might have to separate 2 kids who are, going at each other, not necessarily physically, but even verbally, just depending on what the situation is, how much, what's the chaos index at that moment in your household. And so I think the difference is that we might start with a period of separation of siblings, whether it's two or more, but at some point we're going to come back to address whatever issues, because as we say all the time around here, it's not over till it's over, but when it's over, right? So this fits into that first part. It's not over until it's over. And sometimes it's just too easy to separate and say, hey, once they're separate, they'll calm down, everything will be fine. And we don't really have to go back and even talk about what happened.
Right.
But we should.
Yeah. Yeah. Tana, obviously parenting a large family, not that you guys have ever had conflicts between siblings, because that wouldn't happen in the Ottinger house, but for other people of.
Right.
How have you, we talked again before we started recording about just the diversity of context and of things. Would you mind just kind of sharing your perspective on this?
Yeah, I think, first, when I think about siblings, that's just a big bucket. It's a huge topic because, in like the rhythm of a family, there's moments where there's like moments of ease and rest. There's moments of like where the temperature in the home might get a little hotter, or the relationships might be sort of smooth, and then they might struggle. And I think to me, there's so many things we could talk about, but as a mother to 6 humans, to me, it's a lot about my expectations of like, what did I think this whole family dynamic was going to be? How am I showing up in the moment? How am I setting these relationships up for success? To sort of Matt's point of like, what's the big goal? When the temperature gets hot and relationships that are precious to you might not be going smooth, then I think there's a lot that we could talk about in the middle of that. And so I like thinking about sibling relationships. There's 2 people in that situation, and then there's this sort of relationship that needs to be talked about. And then it's all happening in the context of this family unit. So there's so many layers of awareness that are going on that, I'm not minimizing it, but I do think it's about like curiosity and sort of coming at that relationship of like, what are the main things here, and how do we foster sibling health? Yeah. And how do we work through it with what if you got different personalities and different sensitivities and different preferences and different physiological responses to things? What if you've got siblings that have had different histories and different prior experiences? Like all of those things come into the play that can just sort of show up in the rhythm of a day and the rhythm of interaction. So I think being like empathetically aware is maybe kind of the first step. And then I'm sure Lauren and Matt have like 1 million really good ideas of like how to foster. I would say it's about sibling health and how do you foster that? So being respectful and aware and celebratory of differences. And y'all, it's real hard sometimes to celebrate a difference that may be different than you and might be causing some moment of temperature rise in your family. Yeah. So individual, part, and whole is part of this conversation, I think.
That's good. That's really good, Tana. Lauren, I wonder if you had, I will not ask you for specific stories. Obviously, we're not going to, do that. But I wonder if you had a family come into you and just say, hey, we're going through it. And it's not just every now and then. It feels like it's perpetual. There is a constant conflict between, these 2 of our kids. It's constantly going on. Are there ways apart from what Tana talked about that you would start to kind of address that with them? And how would you approach that as a therapist?
Yeah, sure. So Tana, what you said was it plays out in little bitty ways all throughout the day, right? So we can look at this big general picture of like sibling health, individual health, relationship health, but then like, how is it impacting, how is it causing disruptions throughout the day? Mm-hmm. And typically, when you ask parents, when they're coming to us, they're at their wits' end, and they're never getting along. It's all the time. There's nothing they can agree about. But if we really kind of step back and like Tana said, get curious and look at the why behind behaviors, look at the needs that maybe aren't getting met, typically we see patterns. You know, I know at my own home, our pattern is, I've learned it this year, when we all come together, when all 5 humans and our dog come together, there is chaos.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I had to take a step back to realize that actually our whole evenings weren't bad. It was just the transition of all coming together that was really hard. And for some families, it might be when we're all in the car together, or dinner time, or night routine, or morning routine. You know, it's going to look different for everybody. But I think we just kind of have to step back and get curious of like what's not working well. What does each person need in this moment based on all their individual differences and needs? And how can we put some structure in to start trying to meet some of these needs?
And what might that look like? Like, would you mind giving an example of just like, here might be some structure that we might put into place in a specific situation?
Sure. I can remember a family that I worked with who, being in the car together was just really, really hard for the siblings. And so I helped the mom create a structure for like, who was going to sit where and how are we going to rotate that to make it feel fair? You know, and I remember that when I was younger, I had front seat for a week. My brother had front seat for a week, right? And we rotated it out. There was no confusion about that. And so it can be just little things as simple as that. Or seating for children who tend to not get along as well as others, figuring out how to change the seating so that maybe they're not sitting next to the sibling who's causing more conflict for them. It may look like staggering bedtimes, right? It may look like tag teaming with whoever you're co-parenting with, if you're co-parenting with somebody, right? It may look like, hey, me and this particular child seem to have a lot of struggles at night when I'm trying to put them to bed. Maybe we need to switch this up. Maybe I'll put this other kiddo to bed while you put this one to bed. So, it's hard to give tangibles when there's so many different scenarios, but I think it's just looking back to say, where is the conflict specifically happening? And is there a different structure we could put in place to address it?
Matt, does that bring up anything when you hear that, thinking about, putting some structure in place? And then, if we're looking at, we get some structure put in place, does that then allow us to start really trying to get to the root of some of these issues?
I think so. I mean, Tana, as you were talking a minute ago, I just thought about it. This is just another case where we have to meet our children where they are. You have to meet the individual child where they are. And I realize with sibling conflict, there's more than one child, and they have different needs, and they may have competing needs. And 2 children acting a certain way in a certain moment don't necessarily have the same needs, right? So that's part of the connection event, after conflict, is sitting down with that child, or at least, the children individually, when they're regulated, and talking through, what do you need? And how can we meet this need better in the future so that you guys have a better, how would that scenario play out better if you knew that, your needs were going to be met? And this doesn't prevent conflict, right? It's going to happen again. It's not like, oh, we just had this conversation and, within 5 minutes after they're back out of the room again, they're going to be into it again, possibly. But what you're doing is you're planting seeds, and that's what you want. You want them to be more aware of what their own needs are, and what are you really doing when you have that conflict, or when you start that conflict, or when you when you escalate the conflict. So yeah, I think there's that needs to be part of the structure. And also, you didn't necessarily ask this question, JD, but I'll go ahead and sort of answer it before the question. But it makes me also think about just some of our powerful connection tools, that we teach our families, like redo and repair. And let's use some of these opportunities and say, hey, if this had played out differently, what do you think that would have looked like? And can we see if you can get some buy-in on doing a redo with the sibling conflict situation.
Matt, you said a second ago, I think what might be the key phrase here, you said, and once they're regulated, and I feel like you breezed over that. A massive part.
Well, right. And actually asking what do you need is a way to help them get to a place of regulation, right? Because they could be mad. I mean, some siblings, depending on, again, their neurobiology, their personality, they could be mad for hours. They may have to go to sleep before they can re-regulate. And you may have to talk to them about it the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And as Tana, we've talked before about, like, at some point in every one of these episodes, the fingers point back at us as parents, right? And Matt, you said something that I would have been taught by my granddad. You don't let the sun set in your anger. That is not okay, whether it's a conflict with your spouse or siblings or whatever. And Tana, thank you for shaking your head. Would you address that?
I think curiosity is the key here. And I'm thinking about, some of our kids are older now, and just how this plays out over time, I think is part of what we want to think about. Like, there's sort of this in the moment hot tension that sometimes can happen. And then it's why I'm like, let's make sure we're thinking about the relationship as a whole. We want things to go easier. I love, Lauren, you took us straight to the moment when everybody's trying to walk in the door, get settled, and eat dinner. That's the day-to-day moment when it gets hot.
Yeah.
But if there's constant tension there, and maybe they're, tweens or teens or getting a little older, I love this idea of coming at them, not from a hey, we've got to stop this business. We need to cut this out. That's a tone. That is not going to necessarily create felt safety for the individual as part of that stressful moment to get curious. So coming at a teen or tween and being like, hey, honey, I want to help support you. And I want to help figure out what's maybe going on here. Do you have any ideas? Do you have give them the freedom inside that adult child relationship to be honest about what they're feeling. I'm really mad at so-and-so. It seems unfair. Such and such happens. They're getting on my nerves. Whatever's really happening there, create an opportunity for them to feel like you can see them and support their lived reality. Okay. Their experienced truth. However shaded or jaded or cloudy it really is, just be safe. And then you get to sort of say, I wonder what's going on inside of you. And then they feel felt. And then you're modeling this curiosity. At some point, you're going to know when it's safe to ask them to think about the other person's experience. It happens. You can't come at it first.
Yeah.
And it may not happen the first time, but at some point you can say, okay, what do you think might be going on with the other person? What do you think their experience at that moment was? What do you think was happening? And you're modeling curiosity and empathy and compassion. And then you're going to collaborate through the moment to get to some solutions. And that does not happen in the moment. That is so outside the moment. That's the next day. That's this weekend at ice cream at Sonic. That's not in the moment. That is this curiosity. And so you begin to help siblings learn who they are.
Yeah.
You can create an environment where there's a high, emotional IQ in the family where I remember when we first started talking about stress responses and just helping them celebrate their own as not that their sibling's stress response isn't worse than theirs.
Yep.
It's different. I'm sorry, honey. I know you might be a freezer and society thinks that's wonderful. And your sibling might be a fighter and society thinks that's awful, but baby, they're the same.
Yeah. Yep.
And so something can happen. I just believe that the hottest moments have so much capacity for self-reflection and growth and empathy, but it's not about making them only see the other person's side. They need to feel felt and seen too. I'm sure I'm going to stop and let y'all give some feedback, but I'm just man, sibling dynamics and rivalry, you're such a good spot to love your kids well. I know that y'all are being Tana, we hate you right now. Stop talking about this like it's positive, but it is. It can be such a good moment of just love and care.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I hope to experience that one day. Lauren,
I know. Sorry.
I joke because we are just, in the stage that we're at with kids so close together in this season, today things are awesome. And just, throughout the day, it's just like the ups and downs. Lauren, I saw your wheels turning while Tana was talking just now. I think, one of the things I would love for us to look at is, are there, when it comes to actually engaging with the siblings together, I think we're pretty set on sometimes it needs to be some one-on-one time with parent and each individual that was a part of the conflict. When it comes time to try to start building bridges back or building relationships either back or for the first time between those siblings, Lauren, what advice would you give families who are trying to start that together? And I would guess it varies with age, right?
Yeah. And I guess that would be the first step is let's step back and look at what our expectations are. And are they realistic, right? Because just because we're in a family together doesn't mean that we always have to get along.
Yeah.
Just because we're siblings doesn't mean that we're going to be best friends one day. But we have to learn to respect each other and work together as a family. So I think that's the first step is just, changing our own expectations about what we're expecting them, what they're not always going to have the capacity to.
Yeah, that's really good, Lauren.
So what does that look like? I mean, it could be, like Tana talked about, modeling empathy. And then once we are able to validate and let a kid feel seen and heard, then we can start to teach empathy. Right. And so Matt and I were talking about this diagram the other day. I don't know if y'all have seen it. It's a cartoon. And it talks about fair is not equal. And so there's 3 children that are 3 different heights and they're standing behind a fence, and you give them all a box that's the same size, and it's not fairness. Only one's going to be able to see over the fence and the other 2 don't have enough support. And so when you give them different sized boxes or stools to stand on, then they can all see over the fence. And so teaching kids that yes, your sibling does struggle really bad with this, one issue, this is really hard and it can be really frustrating and it can really disrupt parts of our day. This is why this might be happening. This is what your sibling needs in this moment. This part of the day can be really hard for you, and this is what you need. And so you're teaching this is all a give and take, right? We're going to have to show support towards one sibling at some moments, and at some moments you're going to need that support. So we're just building that empathy.
That's really, really good.
I wrote fair isn't equal on my notes to make sure we said that. That was a major mindset shift in our family. And I remember they were probably tween and teen when we started really having to talk about that. And y'all, I feel like it's done them well into this young adult stage. I know it's hard to broach some of those things, and you don't ever want to pit a sibling in the family as the hard one or the bad one or the problem. We've got to be so careful to just navigate those waters with caution and compassion. And it's not always going to work out. You're not always going to do it perfectly. Okay. You're not, but really fostering curiosity and, Dad and I are here to do our best to take care of each child the way they need. And I remember a couple of times being like, honey, I know that's hard. Can you just put yourself in the other person's shoes a minute? And it's probably harder for them than it is you. Can we just do that for a minute? And then we're going to get up, and I don't mean that to shame you. Navigating this without shaming is tricky. I don't know. It's a tricky spot.
Well, I think that's where the redo comes in. We're not saying you should be doing this differently. You don't, you should or shouldn't. It's more hey, could we try that again a different way? And once we've tried to build those empathy skills and modeled that for them, I think it becomes easier over time.
Matt, I want to ask, when a situation like this turns into not just the chronic, that's happening all the time. If there's ever, sometimes we hear of and stereotypically there's the picture of the big brother bullying the little brother, or the big sister, big sibling bullying is a stereotypical thing that's talked about real lightheartedly all the time. Sometimes when you're in it, it does not feel so lighthearted. And so how can we, how would you address that issue with parents or give them advice to kind of set a framework for that in their house?
Right. I think that sometimes it helps in those type situations, if you can build a little bit of an alliance with that older child, and this is delicate, right? Because you don't want to make it seem like you don't want to parentify that child and make them think that somehow now they're responsible for, other siblings' emotional well-being as a whole. But you can enlist their help. And I think it starts with them feeling felt and them getting empathy from you as the parent. But then I think that it is appropriate. Just like when, older kids get harder chores, but they also get paid more to do those chores if they, get an allowance or, whatever. They're sort of rewarded in a way with more responsibility, and just having them as an ally, if you can foster that sense with them, that they can actually help create better connection in the family. But again, making sure their needs are met too. That can be one way that you go about it.
Yeah.
Matt,
I think. Go ahead, Lauren, please.
I'm just thinking of a small example in my family of how that played out. So I told you I have a teenager and then I have a preschooler. And so we can imagine who's the one that's always expected to do more and better is my teenager, right? And we're constantly telling him, you're not the parent. You're not the parent. Stop trying to parent your sibling. And one day I think I said, you're not his parent, you're his brother. And he said, thank you for saying that. I was like, well, you're his brother. You know that. And he said, but you never say it. You just always say, I'm not the parent. And so I feel like I'm not important.
Mm-hmm.
And so, now it's sort of a joke between us, and our hardest times will be like, but you're his brother, right? And then we can all stop and have a lighthearted laughing moment. But I think because I have all these high expectations of him, because he is the older one, his brain is more developed. I'm missing all of his needs in that moment. Like, I'm a part of this family too. I'm a brother too, right?
I think a little, JD, when I think about sort of that idea of if there's bullying or something sort of happening in a home that isn't something that you can let go on. Yeah. There's a phrase, and I mean, I don't know, I'd be curious. I don't know that I've asked Matt, and Lauren specifically, how do you feel about this therapeutically? So please feel free, on this podcast live, to be like, yeah, Tana, no. Okay. So I'm going to throw this out and tell me what you think. And it was in the context of creating felt safety around sort of physical aggression and verbal aggression. So the way you could approach the older child is something like, hey, this is a safe place and I wouldn't let somebody bully you. And so I can't let you bully your younger sibling because this is a safe place. Mm-hmm. And so you frame it like, hey, I would protect you at this level at this age. So I'm also going to protect the younger one at this age. And I wouldn't say protect, because that's going to make them seem like they're a bad guy. But I wonder if you could frame it and we're not going to do this behavior because I wouldn't let somebody do that to you. So we're going to nip that in the bud. Now I want to know why you feel the need to do that. Do you need my support? Do you need some structure? How can I help you? Come to me for help. You've got to be available, very available, physically, emotionally present to fill the need between whatever's happening in that moment. What are y'all's thoughts about that, Matt and Lauren? That phrasing.
That phrasing, because it makes us all equal, right? And then the most important part is, though, but let's still meet whatever need was met. Let's figure out what are you feeling right now, and what else can you do besides take that feeling out on your sibling.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's good too, Tana, because you're also inserting your feelings as the parent there, and I think that's appropriate to say. I love all of
you
kids. I love all of you, and I don't want anything bad to happen to any of you. I don't want to encourage any sort of bad behavior between you. And so I think it's okay to say it hurts me if you hurt them, just like it would hurt me if they were hurting you, if they were the bigger or the older kid, if they were hurting you that way. Right. And so there's some I mean, I think kids know this, but I think sometimes it's good to just put it out there that, hey, as a parent, I have feelings about this. And my feelings are to, encourage peace and not see people hurt, whether you use the word, protect or, whatever. Like, I want to protect all of you, right?
Yeah.
I want you all to be safe.
My job, quote unquote, my role to create safety, emotional, physical, felt safety. So that's when you're like, I'm providing this for you. Now you're going to help me provide this for them and vice versa. So that's that collaborative piece that I think is part of the puzzle. It's not just stop, quit. It's, well, what else do you do instead? What's the alternative to this moment of tension? Yeah. And are you really available to help me, or am I on my own here?
Yeah.
That's really good. Well, guys, as we kind of wrap this conversation up, I mean, I think there are variations of this we could talk about all day long, but any last thoughts of just kind of, parting words? We're about to leave our therapy appointment with you guys. Like, any last words that you would want to give to parents as we close this out today?
I heard something a while back. Tana, it was actually at a train the trainer event. I heard somebody say that they read some research that indicates that when siblings fight, they're actually trying to get closer to each other. And it's not a conscious thing.
Yeah.
But
like an adaptive strategy or something, right?
Right. I don't even know if that's true. Like, I can't find the research that shows that. If I could find it, if anybody listening could find it and send us the link to it, that would be great. I find it useful though to for parents sometimes to just say that to their kids. But, hey, when you guys fight, did you know you're trying to get closer to each other?
a little, what is that, reverse child psychology or something there, Dr. Matt? Right?
No, I'm not.
Totally.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Lauren,
it does feel like it could be bids for connection, though. Like, in our language, like there's something going on. They're trying to work out this relationship somehow or another, right?
Yeah, because if you do not care about the actions against you, then you're just like, well, it doesn't bother you the same way.
It's often not acceptable to have a sibling that seems completely content with whatever it is that they're doing, and it's without you. So you want to interject yourself into whatever it is they're doing and say, hey, you need to pay attention to me, right? And that's the way some of these conflicts start.
So true. Lauren?
Yeah, I think don't hesitate to seek support if it feels unmanageable, right? If we feel worried about future impacts that this is having on our children, that could look like family therapy or sibling therapy, individual therapy, whatever that might look like.
It's good. I mean, that's a very concise but powerful piece of advice. Yeah. Tana, last thoughts before we close out.
I'm thinking about, we were getting some supplies to put in our Memphis Family Connection Center therapy lobby. And I was reaching out to different staff. What would you recommend? And Lauren, I think it was you that sent me a message and was like, what about these, child parent journals? And I think that that's coming to my mind in terms of what kind of bids for connection are happening? Who's needing help? Why is the stress level? What needs are not being met? And I'll just say that I do think that there's some fundamental realization that we meet our children's needs individually. So these parent-child journals are opportunities for them to feel like we see them as an individual, And I know that there's all kinds of cultural and societal things we could talk about, but like individuals make up a whole. And so if we're needing some sibling dynamic health, make sure you're meeting their individual needs and then figuring out how to foster that relationship connection through support. So maybe it would be, to Lauren's point about getting some individual help or some sibling therapy or some family therapy or using a journal or giving them, like, if you're really mad at your sibling, babe, here's a journal. Write and tell me all about it. Tell me what you're feeling or something. Just find a healthy pathway of communication and need meeting rather than just saying, stop fighting. That doesn't actually produce real change and help them solve the problem. Yeah. So collaborate with them, I guess is my word.
And I would say, like Lauren, tag on, I know that you are not saying to threaten, if y'all don't stop fighting, I'm gonna make y'all go sit and with a therapist together. Like, no, that's not how we're going to approach that help, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No.
And we laugh, but I mean, I will just put my hand up and as a
feel like it might come out of your mouth one night.
Like I've worked through it and I have apologized for it. But I mean, that was something that I have said before, like I'm out of answers. What, like we'll sit y'all down with so and so, so like that didn't go over well, doesn't go over well, didn't help. So just skip the pain yourself and don't do that.
And we can be thankful for repair, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate y'all. Got some things I think I need to call a few siblings and check in and see how everybody's doing. I've got a little work to do tonight. So appreciate y'all.
Yeah. Enjoyed it.
Well, that was a great and helpful episode. Hopefully there was something for you to take away in it. I will say that just the framework and just the reminders that Dr. Smith and that Lauren laid out were super helpful and have been something that we've been talking about since recording it. And so that was great. And I'm very appreciative to both of them for coming on today. Don't forget, if you are wanting to sign up for the online course, you can do that at empoweredtoconnect.org. If you are wanting to apply to become a facilitator for Empowered to Connect, please make sure you get those applications in soon. They will close soon in March. So for everybody here at Empowered to Connect, for Kyle Wright, who edits and engineers all of our audio, for Tad Jewett, the creator of the music behind the Empowered to Connect podcast, and everybody on the ETC team, I'm JD Wilson, and we will see you next week on the Empowered to Connect podcast.